So with the planning in mind and as toggleable annotation layers, we need to actually model the retopology and define the exact amount of faces for the end result. But just like with any other task or workflow, it's good to work your way there incrementally to be sure to get it right consistently. So let's hide some of the objects we won't need for the retopology process. The eyelashes are just kind of in the way, as are the eyebrows, and we already annotated the shape. So let's just hide them for now. I already created a simple plane object with the setup from the previous video, so I won't repeat myself. The mouth or eyes are generally a nice place to start, so let's place the first quad at the upper lip. Don't forget to enable face snapping. So there are many different workflows and methods to model anything. Same case for retopology. So here are the three main workflows to add more geometry I want to mention. The sort of classic way to do it is to extrude edges and vertices individually, and once patches need to be filled in, you extrude more components and fill in the faces by selecting all 4 vertices or edges. The issue is that this workflow is pretty slow and requires a huge amount of clicking. So 2 new methods were introduced in Blender over the years. There are more available, especially with some noteworthy add-ons like Retopoflow, but for this course I'll restrict it to what is available for free or in Blender by default. So another way to do this is with the F2 add-on. Some of the functionality of the add-on is already integrated by default, but you can find the add-on in the preferences and enable it right there. Just make sure to go into the preferences of the add-on and disable autograb, which just introduces more unnecessary clicks most of the time. You can also leave it on if you like that behavior more, but I usually just turn it off. With this add-on enabled, you can select a corner vertex and press F to create a new quad in the direction that your cursor is pointing towards. The new corner vertex will automatically be selected, so you can immediately start moving or tweaking it. From here, you can click through each corner and keep adding more faces until the patch is filled in. If there's a whole face loop missing, you can also select 2 verts and press F to create an edge, and then keep pressing F and it will fill in more quads in the direction of your cursor. You can also have the tweak tool enabled to further tweak and drag individual elements to quickly move and create new geometry as you go. But since Blender 2.81, there has been another addition, which is the polybuild tool. This is a multifunctional tool to create, move, and delete geometry for retopology. So if you hover over an edge, it will be highlighted, and you can just click and drag to extrude it. Doing the same on vertices will move them around, just like when you have the tweak tool enabled. Holding Ctrl will let you draw new faces, either one triangle at a time, or from a corner point, just like with the F2 add-on. And then holding Shift will delete faces or dissolve vertices to create n-gons. For now, I'll continue to use the polybuild tool, but as a tip, right now, if you want to get the most out of the tools, I can actually recommend to use the right-click select or industry-compatible key map. The default left-click select is not very efficient with certain tools like polybuild, knife, or loop cut, since left-click is so overused that selecting things becomes impossible. With right-click select, you can use all the functionality with the polybuild tool with left-click, but still be able to select elements with right-click and model them normally with the shortcuts without ever switching the tool. So to get started, we need to be aware of the general edge flow, landmarks, and the articulation areas. This will give us the info we need to get the basic retopology of the face. So looking at the mouth, we already got the center loop for the articulation, and we can just move and extrude out the rest of them. To hold the corner of the mouth, we need an additional loop on the side. Then repeat the same around the lower lip to make sure the amount of loops is the same as above. But of course, we also need the handle loops to allow for more precise deformations. So on each side of the mid and end loops, we cut in another loop. After that, we can continue to tweak the placement of the vertices, but it doesn't need to be perfect yet. This is just to get the general count and structure of the loops correct. I'll just add the annotation overlay to my quick favorites to toggle them on and off from time to time. Now, to make sure that the amount of loops on the top and lower part of the mouth are always the same, I like to merge the mouth opening for now. You can do this by bridging the edge loops or by using the F2 functionality. Just leave a little hole at the mouth corner for now and add a new loop in the center of the lips. If the corner would be filled, then it would redirect the loops incorrectly if new ones would be cut in, since it's a diamond. So now when adding a loop on one side, it will stay symmetrical. But except for the open corner, just remember to cut in another one on the other side of the corner if you ever add one. So now we have the first major part of the edge flow and articulation built. Let's duplicate a face and continue building the loop around the chin, laugh line, and nose. You can also use the extrude cursor tool or just control left click where you want to extrude it. You can find it in the toolbar nested under the extrude tool. From here on out, you can tweak the placement of the verts and cut in extra loops to match the count of loops with the mouth. We won't bridge these areas yet, but it's good to keep the loop count in mind. The amount of loops on the mouth is the more ideal one to follow, since it's an articulation area. Don't try to unnecessarily add more loops onto the mouth. I'm also going to tweak the placement on the nose bridge a bit to be less of a drastic turn. A lot of the retopology process is tweaking the geometry, but I'll get into methods of making this process easier later on when we have a lot more geometry to work with. If we enable the annotations, again, we can see that there are also loops flowing around the nose itself. So we should add that too. This loop I'll already connect to the laugh line loop, since they are already this close together. At first, they're pretty much aligned the same way, but on the nose wings we want them to split off from the laugh line loop and circle around the nose instead. So let's extrude the edge away from the other loop and continue it from there. This directional shift, of course, will create a pole right there. In my annotations, I placed it a bit differently, but you don't need to follow the annotations 100%. Then continue with the extruding and close off the loop. Just like I mentioned in a previous lesson, I can recommend to not place poles directly on a crease or hard edge. So take that pole and nudge it a bit to the cheek and place the next loop on the crease. This way the deformations will be less stretched and visible when subdividing later on. The last major loop we need is the one around the eye socket. So basically repeat the same process as with the mouth and necessary loops for articulation. Duplicate a face and place it as a starting point. And this time I'll just immediately place all the needed mid, end, and handle loops. Toggle the annotation overlay if they're blocking the view. Again, add 2 supporting loops to hold the corner of the eye. Then repeat the same on the upper eyelid to make sure that it's symmetrical with the lower one. But now, even though we have the same amount of loops on the top and lower eyelid, the top quads are more stretched out. Let's first fill in the hole to make sure both sides stay symmetrical for now. Now to support the shape of the top eyelids, we can cut in a couple more loops and nudge them into position. Same thing on the other side, and we have a symmetrical topology, both vertically and horizontally, and with the optimal minimal amount of loops for the articulation. From here on, let's expand the circular patch on the eye socket up to the eyebrow. Select the outer loop, extrude it, and scale it up. Then select the edges and try to match them with the other loop we annotated, which is essentially the edge of the eye socket. With this, we have all the essentials laid out for the edge flow and articulation, but we can extrude a part of the top loop to account for the eyebrow as well. This can then be tweaked to fit the shape of the landmark we annotated. Looking at the annotation lines for articulation, we can add some more loops and quads to make them fit as well. It's okay if the articulation loops of the eye and the brow are not perfectly aligned. They can be offset by a loop or two. In the next video, it's all about bridging these loops to create all the major patches of the face retopology.